Morning everyone, and welcome to day 7 of my 30-day strength challenge. I hope you're all enjoying your Easter weekend, and I hope you're staying safe while doing so as well. So today we're going to revisit the glute muscles. So obviously we did focus on the glutes in day 2 when we were doing the exercises around the side planks. So while of course we were doing the glutes on that day, we were targeting more the glute medius, so particularly with that lateral movement, that abduction movement that we were doing. But of course, there's more than one muscle to the glute muscles, okay? So it's actually a muscle group rather than just a singular muscle. So we want to target all of those muscles because obviously each one of them has a slightly different function. So whereas the glute medius is of course responsible for maintaining good pelvic posture and obviously stopping that forward rotation of the pelvis, the internal rotation of the femurs, so the thigh bones, and then of course allowing those knees to collapse in and then getting that heel flick as we're running and putting a lot of pressure in that area. The glute max also has a very important function. Now we did focus a little bit on the glute max because we would have been using it slightly during that exercise the other day, because obviously as well as doing the outward movement we were also going back slightly as well. But we're just going to focus on that glute max in a bit more detail today, and we're going to do an exercise which will hopefully give us a better activation of that muscle. Now the glute max is very, very important when we're running and in pretty much any sport that involves explosive power or endurance again, because I keep going back to this all important triple extension movement whereby we have a straight line behind our leg when we're running, okay? So that obviously allows us to power ourselves through the air at about that 45-degree angle and have that nice efficient running stride. Now we looked at quads yesterday, and obviously the quad muscles are very important for doing this as well, because they obviously involve straightening that knee and extending that knee, because we don't want to do it like that. But the thing is though, the glutes are arguably even more important, because it doesn't matter how strong your quad muscles are, if your glute maximus isn't hyperextending the hip from the top, then it doesn't matter how powerful you are here, because you're not going to be using your quad muscles. Your body's going to compensate by bending that knee, so you're going to, if the glute isn't strong enough, so you're just going to be using the hamstrings instead, so you're actually going to be flexing the knee as opposed to extending it. So we want to get it right from the top really, so that we can have this nice straight line all the way down the chain, down to our toes. So it's very important, obviously, for sprinting and being able to power yourself through the air, because we want that elastic energy and that powerful movement to kick ourselves through the air. But likewise, like I just mentioned, sometimes the hamstring does work instead. And again, I turn to distance runners for this, because often distance runners run at the same steady pace without varying their speed very much, and therefore you don't use that glute through its full range of motion, and then you start to get chronic muscle imbalances. So this exercise today should hopefully help to start alleviating that muscle imbalance. So we're going to utilize the resistance bands again today. So again, if you haven't got one, I would advise that you get one. But I will give you another alternative slightly later on, so you're doing the same exercise but in a slightly different way, but without the band. So we're going to tie the band to something this time. We're going to put our foot through like so. Now we want to do a quick posture check again before we start this exercise, because we want to be nice and upright, so we want to be engaging these abdominals. This exercise will be completely pointless if you don't do this, okay? So we need to make sure that this pelvis is in good alignment. Likewise, obviously I'm exercising my left foot, so I'm obviously going to use my glute on this side anyway, but it's also good to squeeze obviously the right glute as well, just to maintain that good posture. So it's very, very important. The most important technical point here is to maintain this core. And what we're going to do is we're going to just hyper extend that hip behind us against the resistance of the band. So one thing that I really like about this exercise is that we can start using those lengthening contractions again by adding the band into the mix. So we can go out like so, and then we can hold, and then we come nice and slowly back in against the resistance of the band, which is of course going to test the muscle a little bit more. Now the most important point, like I say, is to maintain your strength here and not tip forward and do that, okay? Because if you do this, you're not actually using your muscle very much. All you're doing is you're just using your body weight to flip that leg out to the back. So if you start to lean forward again, that's classed as starting to fail. So we're going to just do as many of these as we can while maintaining good form. Now, of course, compared to a lot of exercises, this isn't going to burn as much, but what I am looking for is good technique. Now, if you are struggling for balance, I don't mind you holding on or just touching something for balance just here, okay? But as long as you're not holding on to it and leaning on it, okay? Because obviously another good thing about this exercise is that it's quite specific to your running action. So we're not lying on the floor, we're actually standing up, which of course we'll be doing when we're running. But when you're running along, you're not going to have the luxury of being able to hold something for balance. So you need to obviously use the intrinsic muscles to provide that balance for you instead, so in the core. So if you can, try and do it without touching anything at all. Another mistake people make is that they often kick back sort of too far and they start to get this lordosis in the back just here, which is obviously putting the abdominals under too much strain in order to maintain that neutral pelvic position. So if we can just start off by not going too far back, because you don't have to go too far back at all, and then obviously if you feel confident you can try and get a bit further back while maintaining that pelvis position. But obviously start off nice and small with your movements. Now if you don't have a band, there is an alternative, because you can do it without as well. So obviously just stand on balance on one leg and then just concentrate on squeezing this glute muscle before you move, okay? Because there is a big difference actually between activation and strength. They are two separate things, because obviously activation just involves waking that muscle up. Now if you are a beginner and you do have weak glutes, often I get clients to just practice just squeezing the glute muscle. The reason being that if it's being underused on a chronic basis, then the brain isn't going to be very used to communicating with that muscle. So obviously it's not used to sending those electrical signals through the nervous system and getting that muscle to contract. So if we just think about it and we really try and isolate that muscle and just squeeze it nice and gently, and then we do the movement. So obviously we're not using the band, so it's not going to put too much pressure, so we're not going to start using other muscle groups instead. So this is a great exercise just to start off if you are particularly weak in the glutes. You can also put your hand on the glutes as well, because that just adds another stimulus. So it just creates that sort of mind-muscle connection. So that again, it just gives a bit more feedback to the brain about what muscles should be firing. So see how you get on, see how many you can manage without your technique going. Like I mentioned before, it's not about getting that muscle to really burn, although it might happen. But don't worry necessarily if it doesn't. I'm more concerned with technique. So again, let me know how you get on in the comments. Keep liking, keep commenting, keep sharing to your friends. Let's really try and get as many people on board as we can. Okay, see how you get on, and I'll see you tomorrow.